Increasingly, our clients report thinking they are a little ADHD due to their high energy and impulsive decision making. Many have difficulty even following their own plans. Some of the best and brightest leaders in successful organizations are constantly creating chaos as a result of their inability to stay focused on their stated goals and priorities. And while their resilience and adaptability is legendary, so is the toll their behavior takes on accountability. Their behavior drives innovation and quick decision making while creating chaos, confusion, and an increase in insecurity amongst employees. Join us as we dive into the complexities of chaotic leadership and its impact on accountability.
Welcome to Dismantling Dysfunction, a podcast series for anyone who is ready to eliminate the dysfunction they experience in their organizations, leaders, or relationships. Each week, we explore common dysfunctions in organizations, delving into the systemic causes behind them, and giving you the exact tools and practical tips you need to dismantle them. Now, here are your hosts, organizational development and behavioral change experts, Dr. Anne Dranitsaris and Heather Dranitsaris-Hilliard.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so excited to have you in our audience here today. And we're continuing our series on accountability. And I'm just so excited as we keep talking about this dysfunction in organizations. And today is one of those ones that's near and dear to my heart. But before we go into that, in our previous episode, we explored the challenges that are posed by overly nurturing leaders and the impact that their well-intentioned, but ultimately harmful approach to team effectiveness has. And today we're tackling another common leadership behavior that disrupts employees' abilities to align themselves behind the goals. It reduces efficiency and productivity. And this issue is particularly prevalent in those leaders or with those personality types that have strengths around decision-making, adaptability, and innovation, because it can translate into a lack of structure and a lack of consistency. So before we dive in, remember, subscribe, hit the notification button or bell if you're catching us on our YouTube channel. If you're watching this live on LinkedIn, make sure that you're following either Anne or myself so that you don't miss any of our insights into leadership and team dynamics. If you find our content valuable, and we hope you do because you're in our audience today, give us a thumbs up. And now, with that being said, let's explore the subtle barriers to accountability created by chaotic leaders.
I'll put my hand up for one of those types of leaders. Hey, everybody, and thanks for joining us on our show today. I bet lots of people in our audience, Heather, have noticed that ADHD has become a bit of a buzzword for anybody who has trouble focusing their attention. I mean, really, who doesn't have a challenge with it from time to time? But many leaders who aren't diagnosed with ADHD use the idea that they might have it as an excuse for their chaotic, impulsive behavior. And when we're referring to leaders saying they have a bit of ADHD, it isn't because they haven't been diagnosed. And so we really need to separate out and really affirm that we're not talking about people who have attention deficit disorder here. We're talking about leaders who claim to have a bit of it because they're not able to manage their impulses. They haven't been diagnosed, but they use it as a catch-all explanation for such traits. And this really can perpetuate misunderstandings about the condition and let leaders off the hook for their impulsive behavior.
Yeah, I think that's the really important thing, right? Is like, oh, it's like, I can't help myself. I'm a little bit ADHD. It's like, oh, you've been diagnosed? No. So it's that we're giving ourselves permission in essence, not to work through that developmental gap that causes us. So, again, let's normalize chaotic leadership behavior by saying that for some leaders, and again, Anne and I both fall in this camp, chaos is fueled by this combination of a quest for innovation and a deep-seated dread of becoming static. It's like this need to, we talk about it, constantly improve and to reinvent the wheel. And, it's like, even though something's good enough, it's like, yeah, but I want to change it and I want to do it differently. And, oh, let's go in that direction. Oh, I'm not getting a result fast enough. Let's go in that direction, right? So it's again, it's that thirst for continuous change, and that drives these leaders to constantly be seeking out new challenges, which again disrupts the status quo, often at the expense of order and predictability. And in fact, that can, there's even an aspect of this style, right, is that, not wanting to feel like there's anything confining or constraining, which means staying away from sort of those structures and disciplines that are so fundamental in organizational life. And all of this is at the expense of order and predictability. You think about the security and stability that is needed in organizations in order to foster success. And, again, these leaders will confuse busyness with a genuine productivity. That lack of awareness will lead them to unintentionally prioritize certain things, right, over stability and accountability. They just defer making some of those decisions that they need to. And they don't always realize the cost of all of this to organizational cohesiveness and alignment, employee security, and that undermines the very foundations that they're truly aiming to build upon.
And, I like what you're saying about, it's normal to have these types of symptoms. And it's also normal for certain personality types to be more oriented toward these types of chaotic leadership behaviors. And even the Peter Pan syndrome, which we've talked about a lot. And these brain organizations, the quest for continuous improvement, the future focus, the, besting one's own idea, all of these can mimic ADHD because we're jumping from one thing to another. And, the best way of putting this, I think, is to talk about the parts of the brain and a little bit about the individual personality types or striving styles, because rational brain dominant thinking leader styles of the ENTJ and ESTJs, for example, they have a need to be in control and they seek efficiency. And so there's a real push, a real impulse in them to make a decision and make a decision fast. And in their effort to make a decision fast and following that impulse, what they do is they don't include other people in the decision-making process. And then what it looks like to other people is that, their opinions aren't valued, that things are changed on a dime, people get blindsided by the changes. And this is just, this extroverted thinking function of the leader striving style that can cause these people to appear to be overly impulsive. And we know quite a few of them that say that they think they're ADHD because even though they love making up plans and setting plans, if they have a better idea, they'll change on a dime too. And the other rational brain style is on the right side of the brain is that intuitive function, like performers and visionaries of the striving style, the ENTP and the INTJ, like Heather and myself. We're known for our innovative ideas and our love for exploring possibilities. And of course, everything is possible, and we can get really excited about the possibilities and spend more time following the possibility than we spend following the plan. And of course, for our direct reports, for people who work for us, it creates a lot of chaos and inconsistency in the organization.
Yeah, not to mention what it does in our home life. As I refer to myself as the queen of 90%, I love starting things, but oh, that's enough. Let's move on to the next. Let's do this. And that's our very patient husbands behind the ENTP and the INTJ, let me tell you, right? So, it is that combination of that desire for new challenges and intellectual stimulation. And I think about one of our clients who was known for, spending a whole bunch of time building out the plan, getting everybody aligned and on the plan, and then suddenly would get exposed to some new idea, new thought, new book that was read, and then come back and in the middle of the meeting completely redirect everything by, posing a question or a new challenge, or, I think we've got this all wrong. And, and in some way that's play, right? It's like that, as Anne was saying, that loving the possibilities is that we like to play with ideas. And the challenge is that when this style of leader sort of drops into their environment, trying to get everyone else to play with them, folks end up feeling scrambled and overwhelmed and out of control and frustrated because they just don't understand this chaos that they're finding themselves into. And again, that pursuit of newness is often from a desire to avoid settling into more conventional adult roles and responsibilities that might be perceived by them as mundane or limiting. They don't like hierarchy. And so people who typically struggle with that entrepreneurial brain and Peter Pan syndrome are often the ones that we find that produce this sort of more chaotic leadership approach that has a direct impact on accountability in organizations. So again, getting that excitement, and that's why people love working with them too, is they get excited, they're excited about their ideas, they've got high levels of energy, that desire for constant engagement, and they can create so much chaos at work as a result of it. And they're inherently restless, right? They have difficult focusing on one task for extended periods of time. Again, which another thing that can, have them mistaken for ADHD symptoms.
Yeah, I think in terms of talking to friends and clients who, are extroverted intuition or extroverted thinking, that they don't think of themselves as having to develop up anything in them to manage their impulses, because, hey, if they're in a leadership role, they can just run with it, and they start hiring practices within their organizations where they'll only hire people who can tolerate chaos. Anybody who will want to come in and create stability isn't going to be a good fit for their organization, because as you were saying, Heather, it's that, growing up and putting in systems and taking care of the needs of the business that to them feels so limiting. And, whether it's personality type or a failure to develop up the executive function of the brain, or developing emotional intelligence, managing impulses, at the end of the day, leaders really still have the responsibility to develop and model effective leadership and interpersonal behaviors. Using the excuse of, I think I'm a bit ADHD, doesn't give them a free pass. They have to learn to tolerate frustration and delay gratification. Of course, who with the Peter Pan syndrome wants to do that, right? They have to manage their emotions and impulses in a way that positively influences the organization. Suggesting that ADHD-like symptoms excuse these types of counterproductive behavior really overlooks the essential efforts leaders need and the developmental path they need to be on and stay on, to stay out in front in their organization, to keep everyone aligned, focused on goals, and to hold people accountable, including themselves.
Yeah, that's the tough one, right? What, I have to follow my own system? But
Right.
And you make a really good point here, is that, and we say this with any situation that a leader finds themselves. If you're, sort of go into that place of saying, oh, well, it's because of this that I'm like that, really, it's just moving us further away from our own development and our own potential. And we, it really highlights the importance of self-awareness, right? Really having that understanding of how our brain is wired, what's driving our behavior, where are we at in terms of our emotional development, our emotional self-awareness, our emotional self-management, impulse control, all of those elements, and the importance then of pursuing personal development in leadership roles. Because the way we move ourselves out of chaos and learn not to, be constantly in that state of creating it, which gets in the way of accountability, is by looking to ourselves and figuring out, okay, what do I need to do in order to move my organization forward? And the thing is that leaders who recognize their tendencies towards impulsivity or disorganization, you really have this great opportunity to seek out strategies and resources, because it's not just about, I have to change my behavior, but it's like, what can you put in around you, the systems, the structure, the team members that are, that don't have the tolerance for chaos. So they work with you in order to create some level of stability that works for the business. And also to potentially pursue professional guidance to help mitigate some of those challenges, right? Because some of these things, we can't do it on our own, right? If we had the solution already, we'd be moving towards it, because we have to work through our own resistance and our own discomfort with this. And it's not about fixing oneself. It's not about changing oneself to fit some conventional mold, but really about expanding our toolkits as leaders to be able to navigate these complexities and understand where the chaos is okay and where the chaos is absolutely not okay, and what that means for us. Again, that awareness, and then what do you do to support yourself within that?
And I know we've had leaders, Heather, who have said, but if I stop doing this, it won't be fun anymore. It's the biggest fear that leaders who have the brain style, especially of the performer, the visionary, where the part of the fun is in starting new things and getting the ball rolling and getting excited about what is possible. It's not the mundane, it's not following those routines. But when these entrepreneurial brain styles, when they don't really look at what's the impact that I'm having on my people, and if I just keep jumping from one thing to another, how in the world is anybody going to be able to follow me? They really don't recognize the impact that they're having on people, and some notion that people should just be able to drop everything and jump to the new idea. It causes so many issues. And often, there's some person on the team that gets scapegoated because somebody has to put their hand up and, say, but we said we were going to do this. And if we do this other thing now, it means that all of this work is going to go by the wayside. And that naysayer, as they're often called, is then targeted, and the leaders can become very upset. The chaotic leader can get upset with people like this. And so you can see where that in itself gets in the way of cohesiveness on the team, or any sort of solid foundation where employees can't hold their leader accountable to their own goals. How many times, do we hear clients that we're coaching say, but my leader told me this, he said I was supposed to do it. And then when I did it, they said, what'd you do that for? I didn't want that. I wanted this other thing. And not even realizing this chaotic brain style, not even realizing that the employee did actually do what they were asked to do. And, so the unpredictability, the not really knowing how to nail things down so that employees know that they're on the right track. Even asking a question like, okay, you've told me I need to do this. Are you going to change your mind? or is this actually going to happen? People get really afraid to even question. They just have to blindly follow, or they leave, because ultimately an organization like this, especially an entrepreneurial business, what ends up happening is the business goes up and down in terms of its success as much as the leader's behavior will.
Yeah, and it's interesting when I think about sort of our own situation and sort of early stages of my career as a leader, not knowing this about myself, of course, at the time. Only we had this when we were starting out. But again, just the impact that it had on the staff's confidence in themselves, right? Yeah. Because, as much as I would think that I was giving absolutely clear direction, the more detail they wanted from me, and I had to shift into a different part of my brain, and then they would think I was getting frustrated with them, and they'd go away without asking enough questions, and what they'd bring back me wasn't what I wanted. And so there's all kinds of pieces in here which just cause a lot of, distress in the organization. The leaders are frustrated, the employees are frustrated, but it really does. The consequences, though, go beyond just that confusion, right? Where we see, missed deadlines, as Anne talked about, this redundant work where people are doing things where they shouldn't have been, or I've seen this where leaders have the same conversation with multiple people and everyone walks away thinking they've been tasked with something, and then everybody's going off and doing it, and then they start realizing that they're all working on the same thing, but just in a different way. And so that general sense of disorganization, and it really does affect the team's ability to deliver results effectively, or what we've seen where people have to put in really, really long hours in order to deliver against the expectations of this chaotic leader, right? And team members can find themselves constantly adjusting to these new directives, unable to complete tasks, which for certain brain styles is extremely distressing, or pursuing, sort of long-term goals. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, are we going in that direction or that direction? So again, all of this has that fundamental impact on the productivity of the organization, but really diminishes that sense of achievement. That I go back to confidence, right? Is like that inner confidence that we're always trying to build in our people. It's so hard for them to gain that with this chaotic leadership style, because from an accountability perspective, it just never feels like they're getting it right. And in fact, I think that's one of my clients recently said her boss is definitely of this approach. And she just says, it always feels like I've done something wrong, or I can never get it right. Sorry, that's what it is. I can never get it right, because even when I do good over here, the focus then of the chaotic leader is, okay, on to the next. Well, what about all this stuff over here? Why aren't you on top of that? And it's like, but what about all this success over here?
Yeah. Well, in your example, Heather, it really speaks to the lack of awareness about the impact that they're having on people, and people need to spend a bit more time hearing from their boss that they got it right, as opposed to, yeah, we're done, moving on and on to the next thing. You know what? When you said earlier, I think you mentioned a couple of times about the organizational foundation, and this happens a lot in entrepreneurial organizations where they're so busy driving toward the future and on to the next thing that they're not looking at building a foundation, and as a result, there's this lack of feeling that they're actually grounded, that the business is grounded, the leader is grounded, that there's systems and structure and consistency and clarity and all of those good things that make people feel secure. It sets the stage for that security. And, these rational brain styles that live so much of the time in their head and in the future have a great deal of difficulty personally just keeping their feet on the ground and being realistic about what they can do and what they can achieve and what everybody else can achieve. And, we often hear ourselves complain, oh my God, that took so long. It shouldn't have taken that long, because we don't have an accurate idea of how long something really takes, because we have an idea that we should be able to do everything so fast, and so should everything else. And so thinking about foundation building, it starts with the leader, doesn't it? It starts with the leaders recognizing that they aren't being grounded and they need to do some things for themselves, let alone what they need to do for the organization and employees. They need to ground themselves so that they're not letting themselves be pulled in 6 or 7 or 10 different directions and expecting everybody else to keep up with them. This sort of structure helps ultimately with that building of the foundation in the organization, where people can really grow and thrive.
Yeah, I always find it interesting, because when we have these conversations with this style of leader, and they always kind of catastrophize it, that when we talk about structure, it's like, this bureaucratic nightmare where we've got like hierarchy upon hierarchy. And it's like, there's a huge spectrum between having absolutely nothing and having, that level of bureaucracy. And it's like, we're just looking for some movement this way. And the beauty, though, is that once, these leaders shift into it and see what it does for them in terms of the results they get and how their frustration drops, because we're closing some of those gaps that they naturally create through their chaotic leadership style. We're putting in systems and people and practices that work to close that gap. They then find that if their time's freed up to focus on other things. And that's ultimately what we want our leaders to be able to do, is to continue to focus up and out, but without creating the chaos or leaving the chaos behind for others to solve. So with that, at this point in time, it's time for us to drop our gem for that podcast, where we provide you with that specific insight you can take away, you can start to work with, whether you recognize and identify yourself as a chaotic leader, or if you are working in the company of leaders who practice this chaotic leadership approach. It's just recognizing that, this behavior does lead to a diminished sense of accountability within organizations. There are a number of pieces that kind of fall apart that we need in order for accountability to be part of the culture within an organization. And it erodes the trust and the reliability, that foundation that Anne talked about, for effective teamwork and ultimately for goal achievement. So where do you start? I talked earlier about the importance of self-awareness and personal development, which means the next step is really working with somebody who is skilled in cognitive restructuring, or what we call cognitive, so making some of these switches, right? And trying to change the mindset, some of those underlying beliefs that are really getting in the way of actually being able to develop and to progress. Application of mindfulness tools in leadership that leads to the cultivation of emotional intelligence. These are all important pieces. And self-awareness, really starting to understand, because most of us, we're rational brain. We think our rational brain drives our behavior, but you have to learn that it's actually your emotions that are driving your behavior, and understanding those emotions, what's triggering them, and then how to manage them and to manage the impulses around that. Mindfulness is an incredibly powerful tool. So if you are one of these leaders, or someone who's one of these leaders, and not just for impulse control, but really to be able to train the brain to focus, to tolerate frustration, which this brain style does not naturally do well, and to stay in alignment with your own goals despite unforeseen challenges, or but this is more fun, so that you can stay the course.
I love that. So the next time you hear somebody say, well, I think I might be a little ADHD, think about this podcast and how it might actually be someone who is looking to excuse some impulsive behavior that they're not quite feeling so good about. And that's a wrap for this episode of Dismantling Dysfunction. As always, we're your hosts, Heather Dranitsaris-Hilliard, and myself, Dr. Anne Dranitsaris. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you've found some tips and tools and approaches that can help you with the chaotic leaders or chaotic behaviors in yourself. And remember, if you're feeling challenged by any type of accountability gaps in your organization and want to know more about what you can do about it, register, sign up for one of our free webinars on why leaders avoid fostering accountability. It's an epidemic out there. In this webinar, we offer you insights into the 4 key mistakes leaders make and what you can do about it, and the exact blueprint to implement and foster accountability in your organization.
Yes, echo Anne's comments. Thank you so much for being in our audience today, whether you're catching us live on LinkedIn or you're watching this on our replay on our YouTube channel, or catching it on your favorite podcast platform. We're so excited that you are part of our audience. Just remember to subscribe, follow us, do all of those things that you need to do so that you never miss out on an episode. And again, we really appreciate you providing us with reviews if you've enjoyed our content, and also sharing our content with others just like you who can benefit from some of these challenges in accountability and chaotic leadership, and ultimately working towards our goal of dismantling dysfunction everywhere. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you for listening to the Dismantling Dysfunction podcast with Dr. Anne Dranitsaris and Heather Dranitsaris-Hilliard, organizational development and behavioral change experts. Be sure to subscribe to get more practical insights and focused tools to help you dismantle dysfunction in your organizations, leaders, or relationships. For more information, visit dismantlingdysfunction.com.